Boiling. When we think of medieval justice systems and ancient punishment methods, few execution techniques were as deliberately torturous as boiling alive. This historical death penalty wasn't reserved for common criminals, it was a calculated demonstration of state power that would make even hardened political observers cringe. In 16th century Japan, the infamous bandit Ishikawa Goemon met his end in boiling oil after attempting to assassinate the powerful warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. But this wasn't a quick death by any measure. The execution process was methodically designed for maximum suffering. Victims were slowly lowered into cauldrons of boiling water, oil, wax, or even molten lead and wine. What makes this execution method particularly horrifying from a historical perspective is the victim's prolonged consciousness. Medical experts today understand that the outer skin layer dissolves first, followed by the destruction of fatty tissue, while the person remained aware through these initial stages. The complete biological breakdown that followed was a process that could take agonizing minutes. Emperor Nero, that notorious figure in Roman history and government, used this method extensively against thousands of Christians, demonstrating how religious persecution and political control often intersected in ancient civilizations. The systematic nature of these executions reveals much about how authoritarian regimes maintained power through fear. During the medieval period, particularly between the 13th and 16th centuries, boiling became the standard punishment for coin forgers across France, Germany, and the Holy Roman Empire. This wasn't arbitrary. Counterfeiting threatened the very foundation of medieval economic systems and government authority. King Henry VIII of England specifically reserved this fate for poisoners, showing how different societies tailored their most severe punishments to their most feared crimes. The political implications of boiling as an execution method extended far beyond individual justice. These public spectacles served as powerful deterrents, broadcasting the reach of governmental authority to anyone who might challenge established order. Historical records from various civilizations show that boiling was often preceded by public announcements and conducted in central locations to maximize the psychological impact on populations. Confined alive, immurement. Perhaps no execution method better demonstrates the psychological sophistication of historical punishment systems than immurement, the practice of confining someone alive in an enclosed space until death from starvation or dehydration. This wasn't simply killing. It was psychological warfare waged by governments against individuals who threatened social order. The 1922 National Geographic Journal documented one of the most haunting examples when travel photographer Albert Kahn encountered a Mongolian woman sealed in a small box as punishment for adultery. Unable to intervene without violating local customs and legal systems, Kahn could only listen to her desperate pleas for food, a stark reminder of how different civilizations developed their own concepts of justice and government authority. Chinese historical records from 1914 describe even more sophisticated variations, victims entombed in heavy iron-bound coffins where they couldn't sit upright or lie down properly. This deliberate positioning maximized physical discomfort while ensuring a slow, psychologically torturous death. The engineering precision required for these devices reveals the calculated nature of this punishment method. Medieval European societies perfected the practice of walling people up alive, literally bricking them behind walls in churches or castles. These executions served multiple political purposes. They eliminated threats to authority while creating permanent monuments to the consequences of defying established order. Historical architecture still bears evidence of these execution sites, with sealed chambers discovered during modern renovations. The psychological component of immurement made it particularly effective for maintaining social control. Unlike quick execution methods, immurement forced entire communities to confront the slow dying of the condemned. Neighbors would hear the victim's voice growing weaker over days or weeks, creating a shared trauma that reinforced governmental authority and social compliance. From a historical governance perspective, immurement represented the ultimate assertion of state power over individual existence. By controlling not just the fact of death but its timing and manner, authorities demonstrated their complete dominion over subjects' lives. This execution method appeared across diverse civilizations from medieval Europe to ancient Asia, suggesting it fulfilled a universal need for ultimate punishment in hierarchical societies. Religious institutions often employed immurement against those who violated sacred laws, particularly in cases involving sexual misconduct or heresy. The practice of immuring unfaithful nuns became so common that it influenced architectural design of convents and monasteries, with specialized chambers constructed specifically for this purpose. Crucifixion. No discussion of historical execution methods would be complete without examining crucifixion, arguably the most politically significant death penalty in human history. Far from being merely a punishment, crucifixion was a carefully orchestrated display of imperial power that shaped civilizations and continues influencing modern political thought. Roman crucifixion wasn't applied equally across social classes, revealing the sophisticated legal and political hierarchies that governed ancient civilizations. Slaves and humiliors, the lower social classes, faced this brutal death, while upper-class citizens typically received more dignified executions. This class-based justice system demonstrates how historical governments used execution methods to reinforce social stratification and political control. The process itself was designed for maximum public impact and prolonged suffering. Victims were first stripped naked and beaten with ropes or whips, a humiliation that preceded the physical torture. They were then forced to carry their own wooden crosses to the execution site, creating a procession that maximized public exposure and served as a mobile demonstration of Roman authority. Once nailed to the cross through hands and feet, the condemned faced hours or even days of agony. Soldiers and bystanders were encouraged to mock, beat, and further humiliate the dying, creating a carnival atmosphere that normalized state violence and encouraged public participation in governmental punishment. This crowd involvement was crucial for maintaining political control. It made ordinary citizens complicit in the execution process. The medical reality of crucifixion was systematically brutal. Death could result from septic shock due to infected wounds, or from asphyxiation when victims became too exhausted to support their body weight and continue breathing. Historical records indicate that being crucified head down was considered merciful because it brought death more quickly, a detail that reveals the calculated cruelty of standard positioning. Emperor Constantine's abolition of crucifixion throughout the Roman Empire in 337 CE marked a significant shift in governmental philosophy and the evolution of state power. This decision reflected changing political priorities and the influence of emerging religious movements on imperial policy, demonstrating how execution methods both shaped and reflected broader historical transformations. The political legacy of crucifixion extends far beyond ancient Rome. Its association with religious martyrdom transformed this execution method into a symbol of resistance against governmental oppression, influencing revolutionary movements and political thought for centuries. Modern discussions of human rights and governmental authority still reference crucifixion as the ultimate example of state brutality. Flaying, skinned alive. Among all historical execution methods, flaying, the systematic removal of skin from a living victim, stands as perhaps the most psychologically devastating punishment ever devised by human governments. This wasn't merely killing, it was the complete deconstruction of human dignity and physical integrity, designed to send unmistakable messages about the absolute power of ruling authorities. The process began with the victim being stripped and bound, their hands and feet secured to prevent movement during the hours-long ordeal ahead. Executioners used sharp blades to peel away skin starting from the head, the area with the highest concentration of nerve endings, ensuring maximum pain while the victim remained conscious. Historical accounts describe pre-boiling certain body parts to soften the skin for easier removal, revealing the technical expertise that developed around this execution method. Death from flaying could take anywhere from several hours to multiple days, depending on the executioner's skill and intention. Victims typically died from shock, blood loss, hypothermia, or infection, but the prolonged nature of the process meant that dying was a gradual dissolution rather than a single moment. This extended timeline served crucial political purposes, allowing maximum public exposure and psychological impact on witnessing populations. The Assyrian Empire, known for its sophisticated military and administrative systems, regularly employed flaying against rebellious subjects and conquered enemies. Detailed reliefs and historical records document these executions as instruments of imperial policy, designed to discourage resistance and demonstrate the consequences of challenging Assyrian authority. These weren't random acts of cruelty, they were calculated components of governmental control strategies. Aztec civilization incorporated flaying into religious and political ceremonies, where the removal of skin carried deep symbolic meaning related to renewal and transformation. However, the political function remained consistent, demonstrating the absolute power of ruling elites over subject populations. The technical skills required for ritual flaying created specialized executioner classes within Aztec society, showing how execution methods influenced social organization and professional development. Medieval European authorities used flaying selectively, typically reserving it for crimes that threatened fundamental social order, treason, heresy, or particularly heinous murders. The rarity of this punishment amplified its psychological impact. Entire regions would remember individual flaying cases for generations, creating lasting deterrent effects that influenced behavior long after the original execution. The case of Hypatia of Alexandria represents one of history's most politically significant flayings. This respected female philosopher's execution by a Christian mob in 415 CE marked a crucial moment in the intersection of religious, political, and gender-based violence. Her death symbolized the destruction of classical learning and the rise of religious authoritarianism, themes that continue resonating in modern discussions of academic freedom and governmental control. Gibbeting. Gibbeting represents one of history's most psychologically sophisticated execution methods, a practice that extended punishment beyond death to create permanent monuments of governmental authority. Unlike other execution methods focused on the dying process, gibbeting was primarily concerned with the political and social impact of displaying corpses, transforming dead bodies into instruments of ongoing social control. The gibbet itself was an iron cage designed to hold a human body in public view, typically positioned at crossroads, town centers, or the specific locations where crimes occurred. These weren't simple displays, they were carefully engineered structures that maximized visibility while ensuring the corpse remained recognizable for as long as possible. The technical aspects of gibbet construction reveal the significant resources governments invested in post-execution deterrence strategies. Scotland's systematic use of gibbeting under the Murder Act of 1752 demonstrates how legal frameworks formalized these practices into governmental policy. The act specifically required that executed murderers be either dissected for medical research or hung in chains for public viewing, options that served different political purposes but both asserted state control over criminal bodies even after death. The case of Alexander Gillen in 1810 exemplifies gibbeting's political psychology. Convicted of raping and murdering 11-year-old Elspeth Lamb while she herded cattle, Gillen was gibbeted at the exact crime scene. This location choice wasn't arbitrary, it created a permanent memorial that transformed the landscape itself into a reminder of governmental justice and authority. Every person passing that spot would encounter physical evidence of state power. Historical records indicate that gibbeted corpses remained visible for months or even years, depending on weather conditions and scavenging activity. This extended timeline was crucial for the deterrent effect. It meant that single executions could influence behavior across multiple generations. Children growing up near gibbets would internalize lessons about authority and consequence that shaped their adult relationships with government and law. The psychological impact of gibbeting extended beyond simple fear. These displays created shared community experiences of controlled horror that reinforced social bonds while demonstrating the consequences of breaking them. Families would deliberately take children to see gibbets as educational experiences, making execution sites into informal civic institutions that taught proper behavior and respect for authority. Economic factors also influenced gibbeting practices. Local governments had to maintain gibbet sites, replace deteriorating iron cages, and manage public health concerns as bodies decomposed. These ongoing costs meant that gibbeting represented significant institutional investment in deterrence. Authorities considered the extended psychological impact worth substantial financial resources. The decline of gibbeting in the late 18th century reflected changing attitudes toward public execution and governmental authority. Enlightenment thinking questioned the effectiveness and morality of such displays, while urban growth made permanent corpse displays increasingly impractical. The practice remained legally available until 1834, but its abandonment marked a broader transformation in how modern governments exercise and display power. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. Few execution methods in human history were as systematically designed to destroy both body and political symbolism as the English practice of hanging, drawing, and quartering. Reserved specifically for men convicted of high treason, this elaborate process represented the ultimate assertion of monarchical authority against those who challenged the fundamental basis of governmental power. The legal distinction between men's and women's executions reveals sophisticated thinking about political symbolism and public morality. While women convicted of treason were burned at the stake considered a more decent death, men faced the full spectacle of hanging, drawing, and quartering. This gender-based difference wasn't arbitrary. It reflected complex ideas about how different types of bodies should be destroyed and displayed to maintain political order. The execution process began with the convicted traitor being tied to a hurdle or sledge and dragged by horses through public streets to the execution site. This transportation phase served crucial political purposes. It created a mobile demonstration of royal justice while forcing the condemned to endure public humiliation and physical suffering before reaching the final destination. The hanging portion was carefully calibrated to avoid quick death. Without the drop that would snap the neck, victims slowly suffocated while remaining conscious for the subsequent tortures. Executioners would cut down the half-dead traitor and immediately begin the drawing, slicing off genitals and opening the abdomen to remove internal organs while the victim still lived. Beheading came only after this systematic destruction of the body, followed by quartering, dividing the corpse into 4 parts. These body parts weren't disposed of privately. They were parboiled to prevent rapid decay and then displayed on city gates and prominent buildings. This final phase transformed the executed traitors' remains into permanent architectural features that communicated royal authority to anyone approaching or leaving the city. The invention of this execution method in 1241 for William Maurice, convicted of piracy, established a precedent that would influence English legal and political culture for centuries. Each subsequent use referenced this original case, creating legal continuity that strengthened the symbolic power of the punishment while demonstrating the historical consistency of royal justice. The political psychology of hanging, drawing, and quartering extended beyond individual deterrence to encompass broader questions of loyalty, citizenship, and governmental legitimacy. By reserving the most elaborate execution for treason, authorities emphasized that crimes against the state demanded responses fundamentally different from ordinary criminal punishment. The Treason Act of 1814 marked a significant evolution in governmental thinking by removing the disemboweling portion while retaining hanging. This reform reflected changing attitudes toward public execution and state power, but the underlying political logic remained: treason still demanded death, but the manner of dying could be adjusted to contemporary sensibilities without abandoning the ultimate assertion of governmental authority. Impaling. The execution method most associated with Vlad the Impaler has become legendary not just for its brutality, but for how it demonstrates the intersection of individual cruelty and systematic governmental terror. Far from the quick death often depicted in popular media, historical impaling was a deliberately prolonged ordeal designed to maximize both physical suffering and political intimidation. The technical aspects of impaling reveal the sophisticated understanding of human anatomy possessed by historical executioners. Stakes were carefully sharpened and positioned to avoid immediately vital organs, ensuring victims remained alive and conscious during the slow penetration of their bodies. The victim's own body weight gradually forced them further down the wooden spike, creating a self-executing torture device that required minimal supervision while maximizing suffering. Vlad's use of impaling in 15th-century Wallachia serves as a masterclass in how individual rulers could employ extreme execution methods for broader political purposes. Historical records suggest he impaled thousands of victims not randomly, but as part of calculated campaigns to intimidate enemies, discipline subjects, and establish his reputation as a ruler too dangerous to challenge. Each impaling sent messages that extended far beyond the immediate victim. The historical precedent for impaling extends back to 1772 BC in Babylon, where King Hammurabi's code prescribed it for specific crimes, particularly women who killed their husbands. This ancient legal framework demonstrates how impaling wasn't simply barbaric cruelty, it was integrated into sophisticated legal systems that defined appropriate punishments for different types of social disruption. The prolonged dying process, which could take up to 8 days according to historical accounts, served crucial psychological functions for maintaining governmental authority. Victims remained visible and audible during their extended death throes, creating community-wide trauma that reinforced political compliance while demonstrating the consequences of resistance or disobedience. Ottoman use of impaling during the Armenian Genocide of 1915 to 1923 represents the method's evolution into modern systematic persecution. This application demonstrates how ancient execution techniques could be adapted for contemporary political goals, maintaining their effectiveness for controlling populations and eliminating perceived threats to governmental authority. The geographical persistence of impaling across diverse civilizations from ancient Babylon to medieval Europe to 20th-century Ottoman territories suggests it fulfilled fundamental political needs that transcended specific cultural contexts. The method's combination of technological simplicity and psychological effectiveness made it attractive to authorities seeking maximum deterrent impact with minimal resource investment. Medical understanding of impaling reveals why it was so effective as both punishment and political tool. The slow organ damage, combined with blood loss and infection, created a death process that was visible, audible, and prolonged enough to impact entire communities. This combination of factors made each individual execution into a mass psychological event that shaped collective behavior and political attitudes. Rat torture. Among all historical execution methods, rat torture stands apart for its psychological sophistication and the way it weaponized natural animal behavior for human punishment. This technique represents the dark intersection of biological knowledge, technological innovation, and governmental cruelty, creating an execution method that was both physically devastating and mentally destroying. The basic mechanism was diabolically simple yet terrifyingly effective. Victims were secured with a cage containing a live rat positioned against their abdomen. The cage was then heated from outside using candles, flaming sticks, or hot coals, creating an environment so unbearable that the trapped rat would desperately attempt to escape through the only available route directly through the victim's body. The psychological dimension of rat torture was perhaps more devastating than the physical suffering. Victims could feel and hear the rat clawing and gnawing through their flesh, creating a uniquely horrifying experience that combined physical agony with complete helplessness. The knowledge of what was happening, combined with the inability to prevent it, created mental trauma that was itself a form of execution. Diederik Sonae's use of rat torture during the Dutch Revolt of the 17th century demonstrates how this method served broader political and military purposes. As a leader fighting against Spanish control, Sonae's employment of such extreme torture techniques sent clear messages about the lengths to which resistance forces would go to achieve their goals. The horror of rat torture became part of the psychological warfare that characterized this historical conflict. The revival of rat torture in South American military dictatorships between 1964 and 1990 reveals how ancient execution methods could be adapted for modern political repression. Military governments in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay employed this technique as part of systematic campaigns to eliminate political opposition and terrorize populations into compliance. The biological effectiveness of rat torture stemmed from understanding animal behavior under extreme stress. Rats' natural gnawing instincts, combined with their powerful jaw muscles and sharp teeth, made them ideal for this purpose. The heating mechanism ensured that rats would act with maximum desperation and aggression, creating reliable results that required minimal supervision from executioners. Historical accounts suggest that rat torture was particularly effective for extracting confessions or information from victims before death. The gradual escalation of pain, combined with the victim's ability to stop the process by speaking, created powerful incentives for cooperation with authorities. This interrogation aspect made rat torture valuable for both punishment and intelligence gathering. The cultural impact of rat torture extends into modern media and political discussion. Popular culture references, from Game of Thrones to historical documentaries, continue using this execution method to represent ultimate cruelty and governmental oppression. These contemporary depictions demonstrate how historical punishment methods continue influencing our understanding of authority, resistance, and human rights. The technical simplicity of rat torture, requiring only basic materials available in any historical period, made it accessible to authorities with limited resources. This accessibility, combined with its extreme psychological impact, explains why the method appeared across diverse civilizations and time periods as a reliable tool for maintaining political control through terror. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time and support. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who might find it meaningful, and comment below the country you're watching from. I'd love to know where you're tuning in. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos like this one. If you'd like to get the digital version or ebook of this video for deeper study, just check the link in the description below. Thanks again for being part of this community. See you in the next video.